Jonathan, it's great to have you on A's Cast Live again. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
We're doing great, and this is your time of the year, the draft. Whenever we talk to the draft experts, it doesn't matter. In all my years doing talk radio, whether it's football or basketball, this is the time. It's your Super Bowl. You got to be fired up.
Sure, we'll go with fired up. Yeah, no, it's it being over All-Star Weekend, it's a lot because it got the futures game too. We don't want to forget those guys and the draft. But yeah, it's an exciting time of year. Just a lot to do, a lot of names to juggle, but I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah, we were talking about it yesterday. You guys, MLB.com, had a great article, and obviously Frankie Montas, his health is a big question here for the trading deadline. But the next 3 weeks, we've got the futures game. We've got Home Run Derby, and we've got some firepower in Home Run Derby. We got the All-Star game at historic Dodger Stadium. Next thing you know, it's the draft, and then we have the trading deadline. I mean, the next 3 weeks is going to be pretty hectic in our game.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting. I think it's a fun time. We'll get to see which teams are, trying to go for it now, and then what they try to do to, replenish or rebuild their farm system via the draft, or if they end up being sellers at the trade deadline, bringing in prospects that way.
Do you like what baseball has done, really highlighting the draft? I know people on our end go, I liked it in June because we'd have our guys already playing by now. But do you like how they've pushed it back and it's now with the All-Star game?
I think there are a lot of positives to have it with the All-Star game. I like this year. Last year, the futures game and the draft were at the same time. And as someone who broadcasts both, that was a lot. But, so I like that the futures game is Saturday and the draft starts Sunday. So the draft will sort of stand alone on Sunday when there are no games on. I think because I've been doing this so long and I talk to scouts all the time, our brains are all wired in a certain way for that June draft. So this last month has been, even though this is the second year of doing it, has been strange. That said, I think it adds interest. They're trying to continue to grow the draft. It makes it a more exciting event. Having been in the theater where they had it in Denver last year, it was exciting to have a venue like that with a lot of fans and a lot of energy and a good amount of players showing up. So I think that even if it's a little bit strange and maybe it would be nicer to get some of those draftees out playing a little bit more, I think overall it's a net gain.
We saw this a few years ago where we started seeing football players where they said, we're going to sit out the bowl game, don't want to get hurt for the draft. We dealt with it here in the Bay Area with Christian McCaffrey at Stanford. He was one of the Heisman Trophy finalists, and everybody was like, whoa, is this really good? And it's taken off a little bit. We've even seen guys with Alabama not play. We're now seeing that enter the baseball draft a little bit. Are you concerned? I know David Force, our general manager, I've asked him, he doesn't like it. Are you concerned we're going to see more and more of this going forward?
I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to become as major of a problem as it seems to have become in football. And maybe you'll see the occasional pitcher just because the injury risk shut it down. And that's kind of basically what happened. There's one high school arm who kind of shut things down earlier than expected. And that's surprising. And listen, that may hurt his draft stock when all is said and done, because you think a lot of teams would rather see him pitch for his team in the playoffs and things like that. But he's very, very talented. I hope it doesn't become a trend. I don't think it will, because there's still so much unknown about these players. I think some of these college football players, and I'll be the first to admit I'm not a huge college football guy, but there's so much more data and so much more track record of what they're able to do that them sitting at a game isn't necessarily indicative of anything. And they're also going to be asked and counted on to produce right out of the gate in that first year after being drafted. When baseball, there's going to be a few years before you see even an advanced college guy make it to the big leagues. But we haven't seen any college players, shut things down ahead of the draft like that.
So the big question about USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten is not going to be one for you.
No. We've talked a little bit about it in terms of the baseball world, but in terms of football, it matters not to me.
We've got some big leaguers kids, it looks like, at the top of this draft this year. And I mean, if your dad's Andrew Jones, I like your DNA.
It's a great nature and nurture kind of combination deal with a lot of these guys. And this is officially I feel really old draft.
Yeah.
Justin Crawford, Carl Crawford's kid. I covered Carl Crawford in the Futures game, so when he was a prospect. So it just means I've been doing this to him. But yet Drew Jones is amazingly talented. He is what you would expect in center field. He gets comparisons to his dad, who only went out and won, 10 Gold Gloves. He's got a chance to hit. There's going to be power there. He does everything real easy. He could play shortstop. He played some shortstop for travel ball. You would never want him to do that because he's so good in the outfield, but that just shows you what kind of athlete he is. He is a special special kind of player who has a feel for the game that comes with having grown up as Andrew Jones's dad.
And we have seen that it's been recently making you feel old as every single time the Toronto Blue Jays come to town. And I remember doing interviews, when you're talking to Kevin Vigio, go, man, I used to interview your dad all the time for pregame back in my days when I was doing the Giants. But, when you start thinking about these kids, and we have it a lot here, we've dealt with it with the Golden State Warriors, when you're talking about guys who grew up, their dads were in the NBA, Steph and Clay, they grew up around it. There's something to that. And when you look at the scouting, do you bring that into it going, it's not, the moment won't be too big? Ken Griffey Jr., these guys grew up in these clubhouses. They understand the game from a very early age.
Yeah, I think it can't not figure into it. You don't want to put too much weight in it, because just because you have the last name of someone who played the game doesn't automatically make you a first-round talent or a superstar. But the guys who have shown they're talented, they're not going to be bothered by being a top, the number 1 overall pick or a top 5 pick. And you've got Matt Holliday's kid. Also, even Elijah Green, whose dad Eric was a Pro Bowl tight end, gets that part of it in terms of understanding the spotlight. But those who grew up, even if they didn't grow up around the game, they have a much better idea of what the process is going to be like. Because even if you're Andrew Jones's kid, you still have to go likely to rookie ball, to A ball. You need to, make stops along the way. Just because of your last name, you're not going to suddenly get put in the big leagues, nor should you developmentally. So the grind aspect of it, no matter who you are, I think is something that is probably hammered into them, at a certain point in time when it looks like they're going to play the game at the next level. So even if they didn't say roam around the clubhouses, which a lot of them did, they just have that innate sense of what's to come in front of them, how to get through a 162 game season, which is often the biggest thing for amateur players, to go from even a college season to a minor league season of 140 games is a lot. And having that institutional knowledge because of your family helps, not to mention, as you said, the DNA that is often passed down.
When we're looking at the draft and players and timelines, there's still people that believe there's X amount of at-bats, there's X amount of innings you're going to need in the minor leagues. And, I admit in years, we're just going off a 4-year stretch where the A's were in the playoffs 3 out of 4 years. Even last year when we didn't make it, we won 86 games. You're not really thinking about the minor league guys as much. But now that we've got the worst record in baseball, you're like, all right, where's the help coming from? When are these guys going to get here? You want to rush guys. And you'll see a guy like Julio Rodriguez. This guy's hitting bombs against us every single game in Seattle, and he's 21 years old. So are our kids more advanced? Are we expecting them to get here faster if they're legit major leaguers, or are we still trying to be patient and say you need 1,500 at-bats or X amount of innings as a pitcher?
I don't know that there's a number. I think that, I don't know that you should ever use Julio Rodriguez as the sort of case study, because there are always guys, like that who do it much faster than you would expect. I do think that the gap between amateur baseball and professional baseball has narrowed somewhat. Maybe not as much in terms of internationally, just because those guys are so young. Julio Rodriguez was 16 when he signed, so you never know what that kid is going to become when he starts becoming a man, which is what Julio Rodriguez did in the Mariners system. But even, high school with all the showcases and the ability to show what you can do against very good competition, even if you're from, a cold weather state where you don't get it in the spring, and then the college game, the program, I think the gap has shrunk somewhat. Now, that's just not a universal thing and nor have I done a huge study, but I anecdotally, it feels to me like guys are getting to the big leagues a little bit faster. I don't know that there's an expectation. I think that each organization has different benchmarks that they want their players to meet from a development standpoint. I just think that players are often hitting those benchmarks more quickly than they once did.
You know, I've learned over the years of my career, and even a guy that used to work at ESPN, used to be my radio partner, Rick Bucher, covering the NBA at ESPN, used to talk about putting out his mock draft, saying, you know, I was going to have to put out like 15 mock drafts. So my first one isn't what I really thought compared to like my 15th is what I thought was going to happen. Baseball, I can't even imagine what putting a mock draft together is like. That's why it's not like, hey, at number 19, what do you see the A's getting? But when you start to look at where the A's are picking, a lot of value there. Do you still, is it high school? Is it college? What do you see for the A's at 19?
Yeah, it's, I think I'm working currently as we speak on my 6th mock draft, and Jim Callis, my colleague, has also done 5. So we've done a lot, and it's, yeah, we work hard on it, and we want to try to get it right. I think what we often say about them, especially early on, but even this one is, we want to put a name with each team where someone with the team isn't going to look at it and say, well, there's no way we would take that guy. So that, you know, we'll do one last one like Saturday night into Sunday morning right before the draft, where hopefully we'll be able to shake some trees and get some legitimate information. It's tough when the team at the top really holds things close to the vest and no one really knows what the Orioles are going to do. As for the A's, there is some talent. I think there's a second tier of college hitters that could make a lot of sense. We've let me see, like 6 or 7 mocks in a row. We've put Dylan Beavers, who's from Cal. Now, some of that may be just a little bit of geographic laziness, if I'm giving full disclosure. But, you know, I think the A's have some interest. He's got an intriguing power speed combination. You know, has a chance to be, you know, a college bat with a number of ways to impact the game. But they could go, you know, in a whole bunch of different ways. There's some high school hitters, which they've shown they're not afraid to do, that could be right around there, and some college arms as well. The college arm crop has really been thinned, or at least made really much more difficult to pinpoint, because so many of them are hurt or coming off of injuries, you know, are rehabbing from surgery. So, you know, there will be a bucket of those kinds of players that if the A's are willing, or any of the teams that are picking in that sort of 17 to 25 range, say, they could go that route. It's just a question of your willingness to take on that kind of risk.
Well, we do know that the A's have spent some time down the street at Cal Berkeley at these games, so not going to be shocked if Beavers, and we've asked David Forst, and he jokes about it, but we've said, hey, you spent a lot of time over at Cal. Is that what we're looking at? But, you know, the one thing, you can like somebody all you want. We can see this in any draft, but he's got to be there when you pick.
Sure. And I mean, and listen, that's an easy get for anyone in the A's organization to go to Cal to watch a game. You know, just like people would always make a big deal about a general manager going to see some kid play in Florida until you realize that their spring training home was 10 minutes from there. It's like, it's good information. You don't want to put too much weight into the fact that, wow, an A's executive went to Cal to watch baseball. Because not only could you see Dylan Beavers, there are other players to see also, and it's easy to get there. You know, so sure, there's interest. You know, yes, they've scouted him a lot. That does not mean, even if he is there, that Dylan Beavers is a, you know, lockdown, this is the guy you're going to get. Now, if they take him, I want you to edit this part
out. 2 more questions for you. Let's do a little college with the mega conferences. Kind of, they're going to happen. We got Texas and OU now going to the SEC. The SEC has now become a dominant conference. I played baseball at San Jose State back in the day when it was Fullerton, Long Beach, Fresno State. We were the Big West. We were the dominant conference, sending all these teams, you know, like Mark Kotze, Phil Nevin, and these guys. How's this going to play, do you think, for college baseball when you have teams in LA are in the same conference with Rutgers in New Jersey? You got Maryland, you got teams on the East Coast. Like, how's this going to play?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the interesting thing, without having spent too much time digging into that move in particular. For me, they obviously weren't thinking about baseball when they decided to make the move to the Big Ten, because that's a step down from the Pac-12 in terms of baseball. I think the SEC, even without those additions, was still probably the best conference in college baseball. But the Pac-12 was really, really good, right there with the ACC. And, that move, I think, makes it a little bit harder to evaluate what good performances mean. Obviously you're still scouting the players for what their swing looks like, what their delivery looks like, how their stuff plays. And there's data, that they can get their hands on in terms of exit velo, launch angle, all that kind of stuff, which is universal. But if you're trying to get a sense of, is this going to work? And you're not seeing the same quality of pitching that you once were, I think it's another challenge, but it's, scouts have been doing this all along, finding players where you had no idea, because there's some projection that you have to do. I think for whatever reason, Brandon Nimmo of the Mets pops in my mind. The guy played in Wyoming where there was no high school baseball. He was a first-round pick. So scouts are as much of a crapshoot as the draft is, and as much as it doesn't work out, especially as you get further on in the draft, they're really, really good at evaluating players for who they are, regardless of where they're playing.
I will end on this. Recently on the David Force show, we asked him, are you in favor of an international draft? I've read a little bit about it. I know we're in negotiations between baseball and the Players Association. David Force's answer was, yes, I'm in favor of it. I don't know how the other 29 teams feel. I don't know how you feel. Where are you on the international draft? Should we have one? Would it be better for the game?
Now, so I think this is two different questions. Are you suggesting that there'd be an international draft, or are you suggesting that there'd be one draft? Like, is it one or two drafts?
Either or, you tell me. I
think that what they've done with the international system, it kind of introducing the bonus pools to kind of curb spending and really to try to make sure that people aren't skirting the rules as much as possible, has been largely positive. I think one of the issues, and I remember talking to an international scout a while ago, is that because each country really does things so differently, trying to put it into one system is hard enough. And they've done that a lot with a lot of the showcases that they're doing. It's much more difficult to sort of uncover a gem, although it's the same as a 40th round draft pick. You don't hide the players anymore. So question of scouting them, but there's so many showcase events and combines in Latin America that's less and less likely. So we're kind of moving in that direction. The thing that I think gets difficult is how you could possibly compare a 16-year-old from some small village in the Dominican Republic to a 21-year-old at Stanford, say, and that's what they're going to have to do if it becomes one large draft. So I guess if I were to vote, and I don't have a vote in any way, shape, or form,
we're going to make you commissioner for the day. This is your decision.
There's so many things I could do in one day, so careful. I would have two separate drafts, just because I think merging them from a logistics standpoint would be really, really difficult.
That makes sense. I think when you put it that way, how am I comparing a kid in the Dominican Republic to a kid at Stanford?
Yeah, listen, it's hard to compare a kid.
Minor too. We're talking about a minor.
Right. It's hard to compare a kid, a 21-year-old junior who's 3 years of talent at Stanford or Vanderbilt to a 17-year-old from rural Alabama, or whatever it is, or someone who hasn't played against really good competition. It's some of the same thing, but not quite as spread out. How international scouts do what they do is remarkable to me. You remember when you were 16, I didn't resemble anything what I looked like by the time I was 21. So it's, the ability to project and figure out who are going to be the good players, even in the domestic, scouting is hard. The international scouting to me is, it's such a Herculean task.
Yeah, and there's politics involved, and how you can get in and out of Venezuela, and then you got the politics with the Japanese league and Japanese players.
That's a whole different thing.
It's crazy, and yeah, that's why someone like me, it's like I don't know. I'm just waiting for someone to tell us how it's going to work. But I just know from our David Ford said he'd like to see it, so we'll see. But have a great broadcast. Have a great draft. You got the biggest ratings, right, you've ever gotten before the last draft?
Sure. I try not to pay attention to that kind of stuff, but I do think, one of the benefits of All-Star Week, and it's been on TV since MLB, pretty much since MLB Network came into being. It was on ESPN for a couple of years, but it grows in popularity each year. There's a lot more college baseball on TV. So I think there's more curiosity. So I expect if we don't set records every year, it's going to continue to grow in terms of people at least wanting to check it out.
Hey, great stuff. It's always awesome to have you on the program. Have a great draft, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.